Welcome to the Animal Liberation Hour, where we seek insight from animal rights and liberation activists around the world so that we can think, reflect, learn, and be inspired. I'm Michele Granberg, and for this episode, I sat down with Tamara Bedic and unpacked the Farm Bill. I can't wait for you all to hear what Tamara had to say. And I thought I would introduce myself briefly, since I'll be doing podcasts now and again, along with Shreya and Trey. I've been a mentor and team member with AAM since 2020. Animal Activism Mentorship has truly helped me become a better informed and serious activist. I live in New Jersey with my husband, 3 dogs, 4 bunnies, and 2 guinea pigs. Before we get into the episode, I want to remind you that the Animal Liberation Hour is a project of Animal Activism Mentorship. AAM is a free, multinational program that helps aspiring animal rights activists, as well as those who are already activists but want to take their activism to the next level. From one-on-one mentorship to free workshops and trainings to this podcast, AAM seeks to empower humans to fight for animals so that the world will have more activists and we can achieve animal liberation sooner. For more information, visit animalactivismmentorship.com and follow AAM on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Animal Activism Mentorship. You can keep up with the Animal Liberation Hour on AAM social media too. Now, let's get into today's episode. Tamara Bedic chairs the Animal Rights Committee of the New York National Lawyers Guild. She is an attorney, a graduate of Columbia and New York universities, an animal rescuer, and an animal rights activist. In this episode, Tamara and I discuss the Farm Bill, and she announces a highly informative upcoming webinar on August 28th, which includes 7 speakers describing current farm animal issues and the 2 rival farm bills. I hope you are as inspired by Tamara as I am. Here is our discussion. Enjoy. So, Tamara, welcome to the Animal Liberation Hour. So, what is the Farm Bill?
Hi, Michele. Thank you. Well, there are 2. There's farm bills. There's a Republican version that came out of the House where Republicans outnumber Democrats 219 to 213. And there's a Democratic version drafted by Senator Stabenow of Michigan. Now, Senator Stabenow's version is a 94-page outline, while the Republican bill is full format. It's about 930 pages long.
930 pages. Wow. Did you read all that?
No, I skimmed most of it. But I'll be referencing sections of the bill, so perhaps you could add the links to your YouTube header?
Yes, people shouldn't feel intimidated, but should be able to follow along if they want. So, yes, we'll put the links in the show notes.
Thanks. Thanks. One obvious caveat, though, is because the Democratic bill is just a framework, we can't be entirely sure what the finished bill will look like. But we have a good idea.
You mentioned that there are more Republicans than there are Democrats in the House. What about the Senate?
Well, in the Senate, we've got 51 Democrats to 49 Republicans, so an incredibly slim margin. And Democrats don't always stick together the way Republicans do.
What was the immediate reaction when these bills became public?
The Republican version came out first on May 21st, and the immediate reaction, Michelle, was shock and horror that the Republicans sought to reduce the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. It's also known as EBT. They attempted to reduce it by 30 billion with a B dollars over the next decade. Now, we all know food prices have risen since the pandemic, and an average of 41.2 million Americans rely on SNAP each month.
Wait, this is the Farm Bill. What's SNAP money doing in there?
Yeah, good point. The Farm Bill covers so many different policies: food programs like SNAP, farm subsidies, animal welfare, importation of dogs, export of wild horses, diseases affecting bees, pesticides, subsidies for wool manufacturers, government laboratory animals. It's a very, very broad, all encompassing bill.
And how long does it control these things? What's the bill's duration?
5 years.
Tamara, can you remind our listeners just how many land animals are slaughtered for food in America every year?
10 billion land animals, Michelle, and over 90% of whom are chickens.
Ouch, that's every year?
Yeah, according to the New Roots Institute.
So basically, the Farm Bill controls 50 billion lives.
That's right. Yes.
One of the things our listeners may have already heard of is the EATS Act. That's EATS Act. Is that in the Farm Bill and how did it get there?
Yes. Well, the Farm Bill has a very broad reach, as we just covered. And when each party is cobbling their version of the bill together, they roll in already existing bills that are popular within their party. So, Senator Marshall's EATS Act was one such bill, very popular within the Republican Party and drafted in response to the Supreme Court's upholding of Prop 12. Now, we animal activists celebrated the Supreme Court's decision in National Pork Producers versus Ross because it gave a high animal welfare state, California, the right to prohibit imports of pork from a lower animal welfare state, any state using gestation crates. And a month later, Senator Marshall of Kansas put forth the EATS Act.
Yeah, but how is this related to the Farm Bill?
Well, Senator Marshall's bill, the EATS Act, was rolled up into the Republican version of the Farm Bill. So if the Republican version of the Farm Bill passes, so does the EATS Act embedded in it.
So now the EATS Act language is in the Republican Farm Bill?
Yes, under Title 12, Section 12007.
And it will force California to import pig products even if the pigs were driven crazy in confinement.
Yes, exactly. But it's much broader than that. The EATS Act language prevents any high welfare state law from banning the import of animals from another state that continues a low animal welfare practice. Now, let me give you a local example. New York State's puppy mill pipeline ban, signed by Governor Hochul and finally about to take effect in December of this year. The puppy mill pipeline ban says New York pet stores can't import puppies, kittens, or rabbits from out of state puppy mills and then sell them in New York. Now, there's two good reasons for this. First, there's concern that the welfare standards of those out of state puppy mills is really poor. And secondly, New York State shelters are overflowing with adoptable dogs, cats, and rabbits, even while out of state animals keep arriving to our pet stores. Now, don't New York's shelter animals deserve adoption and a loving home? Of course they do. But the EATS Act may preempt our state law, allowing New York pet stores to continue buying puppies from, say, Missouri.
So there's no way to say, "Hey, we don't want to do business with you until you improve your standards."
Exactly. There's no way to say that. State animal welfare laws would be obliterated. Not just Prop 12, all higher welfare state laws related to domestic animals, and in every state. Harvard published a legislative analysis of the EATS Act in July last year and listed 1,000 state laws that might be preempted. That includes over 30 New York state laws, like the puppy mill ban I just mentioned, but also halal and kosher regulations, avian flu testing, etc.
Ah, earlier you said that there were two rival bills, a Republican and a Democratic version of the Farm Bill. The EATS Act is only in the Republican version, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Are there any good provisions for animals in either version?
Well, yes, the Democratic version has several sections that benefit animals. So, for example, Senator Stabenow included the bipartisan violets law into her version of the Farm Bill.
Violet's Law, tell us about that.
Sure, Violets law, which is H.R. 1465, is an attempt to have animals who were involuntary subjects of medical testing in federal labs adopted into loving homes. About 20 federal agencies use animals for research, including the Center for Disease Control, NIH, the Veterans Administrations, etc. Over 35,000 laboratory animals are exploited every year, in federal facilities and endure all kinds of medical tests. Now, who buys these animals? We do, the taxpayers. So if you think about it, these are already our dogs, our cats, our guinea pigs, and our rabbits. Now, sometimes the experiments are so toxic, so injurious, the animals die during or shortly after the testing. But in a majority of cases, the animal test subject survives and can be released and even live a pain free normal life. Unfortunately, often there's no thought spared for them once they're used, once test results are achieved, and once the medical paper has been published. Sometimes dogs or cats are discarded and killed simply because the researchers didn't plan ahead. Now, Violet's Law says researchers must plan ahead. If a test isn't lethal, if the animals are adoptable, efforts must be made to get them to rescues and adopted in forever homes. Killing them because you didn't think it through would be illegal in federal labs. Now, note that I said federal because Violet's Law would not cover involuntary test subjects in private hands, like the tortured macaw monkeys in Elon Musk's Neuralink lab or animals being tested in private universities. So that's Violet's Law. It can potentially save 35,000 lives. That's the figure White Coat Waste cited.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, remember Jeff Lowe, the Tiger King's shady friend who took over Tiger King Park and eventually had all of the exotic cats seized?
Vaguely.
Okay, how about Envigo and the rescue of 4,000 beagles from Cumberland, Virginia?
Yes.
Okay, so what do these two situations have in common?
You tell me.
Okay, so after years of getting a pass from Tom Vilsack's USDA, both enterprises were investigated by the Department of Justice. All of the animals were rescued and removed. There were convictions in both cases. You know, the DOJ does not play, Michelle. They come in, they investigate if the Animal Welfare Act was violated, and if so, you can be sure that prosecution will be thorough. So, another thing that Senator Stabenow's version of the Farm Bill does is it encourages more cooperation between the USDA and the Department of Justice. And that, in turn, may improve enforcement of animal welfare laws.
Yeah, let's hope so. So, this time last year, you hosted a webinar on bird flu, H5N1, and highlighted a horrible way millions of hens and pigs were being killed. It's called ventilation shutdown, although you prefer, and I prefer, the term mass induced heat stroke.
Yeah.
Mara, do either version of the Farm Bill ban this odious practice of roasting animals alive?
Well, thank you for mentioning that webinar, Michelle. And yes, mass induced heat stroke continues to roast tens of thousands of hens alive. I'm appalled that the AVMA just doubled down on its defense of a truly heinous practice. But to answer your question, unfortunately not. Senator Stabenow only calls for greater transparency and record keeping, and there's nothing at all in the Republican version of the Farm Bill.
Anything in either bill that supports vegan or plant based incentives?
No, unfortunately, there are some incentives to lower emissions and other incentives for organic farming, but nothing specifically related to promoting veganism or increasing plant based options.
I don't know about you, but I'm really disappointed that there are so few progressive items in the Democratic version of the bill.
Me too.
I've heard it said that this is because animal ag contributes heavily to political campaigns of both parties. Is that true?
Well, let's break down animal agriculture into three major categories. You've got livestock, secondly, dairy, and lastly, poultry and eggs. So, within the first category, livestock, the top livestock associations like the National Cattlemen Beef Association, the National Pork Producers Council, they contributed to Republican candidates 7 times more than to Democratic candidates. When it comes to dairy producers, the top 10 dairy producers contributed to Republican politicians 2.5 times as much as to Democratic ones. And finally, when it comes to poultry and egg producers, Republicans received 21 times more money from poultry and egg industries than Democrats did. The Mount Air Corporation alone dropped $10 million on Republican and conservative politicians. Not a single dollar went to Democratic politicians. What did the $10 million buy? It got Monter's CEO, Ronald Cameron, access to the White House on the day of the election. And more frighteningly, it got Cameron, mind you, he's a rich chicken dealer. It got him appointed to Trump's advisory committee on the COVID pandemic. Now, if you compare campaign contributions to the two chairs of the two agriculture committees, Democratic Senator Stabenow on the one hand and Republican House Chair Glenn Thompson on the other, you'll see that in the year Glenn Thompson worked on the Farm Bill, 2023 and 2024, Thompson's top 5 industry donors were nearly all from agriculture, whereas none of Senator Stabenow's top industrial donors are from the agriculture sector. So to claim that they're equally bad, that isn't borne out by the numbers on the Open Secrets website.
So the few animal welfare provisions you listed are all in Senator Stabenow's version. So should we all support Senator Stabenow's version of the Farm Bill?
You know, Bad choices, hard to say. Both bills continue to pump millions of dollars into big ag. Despite H5N1 spreading to mice, to cats, to dairy cows, neither bill addresses pandemic risk. Neither bill begins to the task of transforming our food system. Neither bill assists farmers and ranchers who want to exit the slaughter business but owe too much money to escape. Small farmers live like indentured servants in our country. Who's helping them transition from killing tens of thousands of chickens to, say, I don't know, growing mushrooms or microgreens?
You know whom? Mercy for Animals.
Exactly. Mercy for Animals, a charity. And that's great. I mean, we applaud Leah Garces for her work helping farmers like Craig Watts transform. But this effort needs to be scaled up. No one can do that besides the federal government, which is what Leah herself will tell you. In fact, she'll be addressing this very issue on Wednesday, August 28th at noon.
What, in a podcast with Leah Garces of Mercy for Animals?
Actually, a bit broader. Leah of Mercy for Animals, Humane Society's Legislative Fund, Compassion in World Farming, Dr. Rao of Climate Healers, Pat Brown, the inventor of the Impossible Burger, and hopefully, fingers crossed, several congressional reps. Now, these experts have a shared focus, and that focus is the Farm Bill and transitioning us out of an unnecessary and unsustainable system that abuses 50 billion farm animals. Now, the webinar title is 50 billion after the 50 billion animals who will live and die during the next Farm Bill. The webinar is scheduled for Wednesday, August 28th.
Well, AAM supports your webinar, and I will certainly try to be there. How can others be part of that webinar on August 28th?
We'll register for free over Eventbrite and join us. 50 billion lives are at stake. And in fact, that's the link 50billion.eventbrite.com.
We will definitely include the link in the show notes here. So any final thoughts?
Uh, no, no. Thank you very much for having me today and giving me a chance to talk about Farm Bill.
Thank you for pouring through this bill and helping our audience understand it better, for breaking it down for us. And thank you for joining me, Tamara, on the Animal Liberation Hour.
It was a pleasure, Michelle. Thanks so much. Bye bye.
Thanks. Tamara was a really great guest, so informative. Since we were talking about the Farm Bill today, I just wanted to remind everyone about the animals themselves in the animal agriculture industry and what they go through, because they are who we are fighting for. And this may be preaching to the choir if you're an activist, but the animal agriculture industry involves practices that are cruel and unethical. Animals raised for meat, dairy, and eggs are kept in environments that limit their natural behaviors and cause them considerable stress, discomfort, and unimaginable fear. Farm animals are housed in dark, confined spaces where they can't move freely. They stand in their own waste. Let's face it, these industries prioritize efficiency and profit over the lives and welfare of these animals. And when we talk about the animal agriculture industry, it's important to remember that the scale at which animals are raised and slaughtered is staggering. It's hard to conceptualize. Every year, billions of animals are slaughtered for food around the world. For instance, in the US alone, it's estimated that over 9 billion chickens, 30 million cows, and 120 million pigs are processed annually. And then there's sustainability. One of the main issues is the enormous resource consumption involved in raising animals for food. Producing meat, dairy, and eggs requires vast amounts of land, water, and feed. For example, raising livestock for beef can be particularly resource intensive, requiring large amounts of water and feed crops to produce a relatively small amount of meat. In addition to resource use, the industry contributes substantially to environmental problems. Livestock farming is a major source of greenhouse gases, such as methane, which contributes to climate change. The deforestation for pasture land and feed crops also leads to habitat loss and reduced biodiversity. Moreover, the waste produced by large-scale animal farming can lead to pollution of soil and water, impacting ecosystems and human health. The sheer scale of these operations makes it challenging to manage waste sustainably. Given these factors, folks, we must transition to plant-based diets for the animals and for the future of our planet. Let's imagine a world without animal ag and without slaughterhouses, a more compassionate world indeed. If you enjoy the Animal Liberation Hour and would like to support our work at Animal Activism Mentorship, please consider joining our Patreon for as little as $2 a month if you're able to do so. This goes such a long way in helping us grow the animal rights movement through mentorship. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Animal Activism Mentorship, where you can keep up with the podcast, as well as everything AAM. One more reminder that you can sign up for a free mentor to help you with your activism at animalactivismmentorship.com. If you needed a sign that you should be an activist for the animals, this is it. Remember that it will take all of us to achieve animal liberation. So stay focused, stay positive, be effective, and keep doing your part. Thank you all. Signing off. Until next time.